Well, Stephanie's not here today, but if any of you know Dr. Stephanie Graf, this will not surprise you that a few weeks ago, when I gave you the assignment to send in images about how you visually perceive God, I received these images from our own Dr. Stephanie Graf literally within minutes of the service ending. Images of love and joy in the ones that we hold most dear, shown in the faces of our children. Last week, we explored the truth that there is an aspect to God which we may never completely be comfortable with. A reality of God that, as the creator of everything, God created the causes and conditions of human suffering. Realities that we must accept, we must come to peace with. And in that peace, move forward to work for the healing of and work for healing and for human freedom for all. There's another aspect to God, though, that is common to all people. Doesn't matter what religion you are, what culture you are from, that from the beginning of human history all the way to this moment, native first peoples felt it. Stephanie Graf felt it. I have felt it. It's the presence of God that we feel. That sense that there is a holy power in this world that reaches out to us in love and hope. Maybe you've seen or experienced this God in nature. I think over half of the photos that people sent in were something where God was being perceived in nature. Or maybe you felt it in music, in one of those special music moments. We're seeing it in the eyes of a child. It is real, and it touches us all.
Moses was taking care of the flock for his father-in-law Jethro, Midian's priest. He led his flock out to the edge of the desert, and he came to God's mountain called Horeb. The Lord's messenger appeared to him in a flame of fire in the middle of a bush. Moses saw that the bush was in flames, but it didn't burn up. Then Moses said to himself, "Let me check out this amazing sight and find out why the bush isn't burning up." When the Lord saw that he was coming to look, God called to him out of the bush, "Moses, Moses." Moses said, "I'm here." Then the Lord said, "Don't come any closer. Take off your sandals, because you are standing on holy ground." He continued, "I am the God of your father, Abraham's God, Isaac's God, and Jacob's God." Moses hid his face because he was afraid to look at God. Then the Lord said, "I've clearly seen my people oppressed in Egypt. I've heard their cry of injustice because of their slave masters. I know about their pain. I've come down to rescue them from the Egyptians."
There is an aspect of God that comes to us, that's revealed to us in certain moments. And it is as true now as it was then. That moment when you look into the eyes of a child and you know that you must dare to change the world for the sake of the love that you feel. Today is my oldest son's 17th birthday. I remember that. It's powerful. That was a spiritual moment. But we live in a time when we hear the story of a voice calling out from a fiery bush, and we objectively discount it. We have reasons for it. Maybe it didn't happen quite that way. Maybe Moses' story was embellished over the centuries. maybe that moment when we felt God so powerfully, maybe that was just an illusion, a passing moment. After all, how arrogant is it to claim that you have seen God? Al Letson was hired as a journalistic writer. And he was to go to Africa to research for a story he was doing. He actually went to Malawi. How cool is that? He actually went to near where our friends at the Pothawira Clinic are. And it's the same place that Dr. Stacey Algren, we commissioned her to go last summer on our behalf to serve as a doctor in that very clinic. Now, Al is the son of a Christian preacher. But church, religion, he kind of left that stuff in his past. Those Sunday sermons that he heard, those messages, those ancient stories are now a thing of his past. Today, he's a reporter. He sees the world through the lens of objectivity, through observation. As a black man, he was determined that when he went to Africa, his first time to going to African continent was to go to Malawi, that he was going to avoid the cliche of it being some kind of emotional homecoming. He would treat the Malawans just like he would the people of London or Barcelona or anywhere else that he had reported. He went to research the story of Kamuzu Banda, who is the former dictator of Malawi. Banda did what dictators do. People who voiced opposition to him disappeared. So as part of his research, Al wanted to wrap his head around what the prisons were like in Malawi. These prisons where people disappeared. And so he went firsthand to where the cries of injustice rang the loudest. He was allowed to visit Mikuyu Prison, the most infamous prison in Malawi, under the condition that he would not take any video or photographs. Now, Al had been to prisons before in the United States, but the condition of Mikuyu was beyond what he expected. The floors and the walls are made of this red clay, and there's no light. It's so dark, and there are puddles of water and urine all over the place. It was all over the ground where the prisoners would sleep, similar to the picture that's on your bulletin. There were piles of feces in the corners of where they slept. Today, in Mikuyu Prison, all the prisoners are boys, age 14 to 20, dressed in rags. Seeing this, Al's heart broke. But he had a job to do. His is the lens of objectivity, of observation only.
God, why have you abandoned us forever? Why does your anger smolder at the sheep of your own pasture? Remember your congregation that you took as your own long ago, that you redeemed to be the tribe of your own possession. Remember Mount Zion, where you dwell. March to the unending ruins, to all that the enemy destroyed in the sanctuary.
Has the enemy destroyed our sense of the spiritual? Why is it that our sense, our experience of the sacred, of God, now seems relegated and restricted? That even in church, we can feel strange talking about it. Why is there this kind of shame in uttering the truth? The truth that you felt revealed in those moments when you experienced holiness. Why does talking about it feel like you're admitting to some kind of mental illness? Has God abandoned us, or is it the other way around?
On the night on which he was betrayed, the Lord Jesus took bread. After giving thanks, he broke it and said, "This is my body, which is for you. Do this to remember me." He did the same thing with the cup after they had eaten, saying, "This cup is the new covenant in my blood. Every time you drink it, do this to remember me." This meal is a symbol of a holiness that continues to cry out for all those who need to know the living presence of God.
Is the God who the stories say is on the side of the oppressed, now powerless and silent? There is something inside of us that wants to connect to God's Spirit, and you can feel it. Like the waters of baptism, like the warmth in your heart, or in the elements of communion. And you know that in those holy moments, when you have felt the presence of God, that this is right. That no matter what happens, it is well. And you can choose to let that experience of holiness guide you in this life. You see, in Mukuyu prison, there was a Christian deacon, a volunteer who would go to the prison. And guided by God's Spirit, this man had put together a choir of these boys, a choir that no one had ever heard sing. And so he asked Al if Al would listen to his choir of teenage boys, boys my son's age, who are locked up in a hellish prison.
And the whole time they didn't allow, we all see and heard the call and response. And that's exactly what this is. The voice sings and getting it, and everybody joins in. And as he sung, the song hit me like a wall sound. And I could feel it hitting my nose, going through my face, coming out of the back. And it just surrounded me. And on that first song, I was being very much a reporter, just holding my microphone and trying to take it all in. But by the time the
it is not enough to live the days that you have objectively, as if God was a concept, a philosophy. God has not abandoned us. There was a Christian deacon working in Makuyu prison, a man who had been spiritually moved to go where angels fear to tread, a man who knows that God has not and will not ever abandon us, a man who God uses just as God used Moses. God is continuing to inspire people to dare to do something. Use the days that they have in the name of love. God calls you now. God's Spirit will continue to reach out and envelop us. And no matter what religion, what culture, from the beginning of human history to this very moment, God calls us out with a message of hope. It is well.